Alexander Nekrasov is a journalist who used to advise the Kremlin. He's a Putin supporter. Boris Berezovsky is a Russian oligarch exiled in the UK. He's no fan of President Putin. And in New York, the singer Anna MATRONIC from the Sister Sisters, who is one of Pussy Riot's supporters. Alexander Nekrasov, is it a sign of a mature democracy that people can be arrested and then ultimately jailed for singing in church a song that's critical of a politician?
Well, the point is that they chose the wrong place. It's very important to understand that this cathedral was destroyed on orders of Stalin and then was rebuilt in the 90s on people's donations. So it was basically a sign, a symbol of Russia saying no to Stalin.
Were you offended by the song and what they did?
I was not offended by the song. It's not actually a great song, is it? But I was offended by the fact that they were jumping at the altar. Yes, they chose the wrong place. They should have jumped outside the Lenin's mausoleum. That might have been a better place.
Boris Berezovsky, in that place of all places, should they really have been going in and singing a song with the lyrics, "Shit, shit, the Lord is shit"?
Look, I think that everyone who believes in God and who go to the church has his personal language, how to talk to the God. And they presented their language to talk. I think, as far as me is concerned, I was not ashamed. It's not my language to communicate to God, but I was not ashamed. But I would just want to tell that they are very creative. And this is exactly what would destroy any dictatorship. Creativity. Because they are free. And we know a lot of very creative people in authoritarian regime, for example, Lenny who created this triumph of the will, Riefenstein. But creativity finally win against of gray. And I think that it's a big mistake because they will be released in 2014. It's exactly the year where Russia wants to host Olympic Games. And I think that instead of the 5 rings, it will be just 5 balaclavas as a symbol of 2014.
Did you do that yourself?
Yes, I have done by myself with my creative friends.
But have you brought anything in, any artwork?
No, I haven't, no.
Right,
but I must object to one thing, is that they never had a proper song and never had a proper hit. So, you know, it's a bit a sign of desperation when somebody starts to do that.
We might talk about their musical prowess, but Boris Berezovsky, you are convinced that President Putin himself was responsible for this verdict today. Now, where's your evidence for that?
I wrote open letter.
Yes, you did. Where's your evidence?
Not the first one. I got answer not from himself, from his crony from Duma, from Russian parliament.
Where's your evidence?
Sorry?
Where's your evidence for the president being directly involved in the sentencing?
It's myself. I'm alive evidence that Putin direct order to push me out from Russia. He was my friend for 10 years, and I know him well. And I know that Putin is behind of all the major events, major crime in Russia, and not only in Russia, even in this country. When my friend Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned by polonium, no doubts that behind of polonium state is. And Putin was president.
Let me bring in Anna MATRONIC at this point. What attracted you to supporting Pussy Riot?
Well, for me, it's always a question of democracy and how it's expressed. For me, as an American, as someone in a democratic form of government, for me, the most important thing is to have dissidents and discourse be addressed on both sides and have a proper place to be heard and expressed in government. So, to me, this verdict is really indicative, I think, of the beginning of what could be a very large problem, not just for artists and intellectuals in Russia, but people in general, anyone who wants to speak their mind. And that is something that, as an American, as someone who feels represented by their government in a democratic way, that is not That's not how we function in a democratic society. We must have freedom of speech. We must have freedom of expression. We must have free elections. And we must have equal representation under the law.
What do you think it says about what they've done or who they are, that after all the weeks of protests we've seen on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg, it was this action and now this sentencing today that's captured the world's attention?
One of the qualities of the Russian people that I find so endearing and so enduring is their deep, deep faith and the connection to the holy images, the connection to the Russian Orthodox Church. And I believe by choosing the church to stage their protest, Pussy Riot really tapped into the main vein of the Russian people. And of course they're going to start a huge conversation on both sides of the issue. And I believe that this verdict is basically handing the opponents of the Putin government and any person who wants their voice to be heard an instant symbol that is going to fuel the fire of the opposition. And I believe that what we're seeing today is a real cry for justice the world over, and Pussy Riot is becoming the symbol of that. And what we've done, what Russia's done with this verdict, is create this world of bright balaclava symbols that are going to be embraced by people all over the world.
Alexander Nekrasov, if President Putin has had a hand in this, even if he hasn't, isn't this going to blow up in his face?
Of course not. I think his popularity will grow because this will backfire on the so-called protesters. This is a joke. To call this freedom of speech, this is a joke, because Russian people will not respect these women for so-called protest because they chose the wrong place, as I mentioned already. This was a terrible, terrible sight to see.
Well, the number of places people can protest.
And I suspect what they did, they undermined the whole idea of a free protest in a country, if people disagree with something. I think this is a joke.
Boris Berezovsky, there's some polling evidence to suggest that the president's still pretty popular. A poll in May conducted by Pew found that 72% of Russians had a favourable opinion of him. Maybe many foreigners don't like him, but they like him in Russia.
First of all, I don't believe in institutions today in Russia who make public polls, and I know a completely different picture. But the most important is that Putin lost all, without any exception, intellectual part of society. This is the biggest problem for him.
But how's that going to be capitalized on by someone like you?
Just a second. And every leader who is losing the intellectual part of society, finally, he's loser. Sorry, your question?
Well, I'm wondering if you're annoyed and so many other people are annoyed, how can that be tapped into in future?
You see, I think that Putin doesn't have any chance to survive as a leader, as a real leader. And I think there are two ways how he could be collapsed. One way is small internal circle of cronies who recognize that he is dangerous for them. And the second way is street. And sooner or later we'll have the same situation like in Syria, like in some Arab countries. And really? Putin afraid of that.
Alexander?
No, I don't think that will happen because we can't compare the Arab Spring and Russia. Absolutely different situations. And I think that Putin will last for a while at least, and I think that his position is not as weak as some people think.
Anna, I heard you chortling earlier. What was making you laugh?
I think the history of Russia has shown us that facts and polls and elections can absolutely be skewed in favor of whoever is in power. What I fear, just coming from the point of view of history, is when you start silencing and persecuting people for their political opinions and their political creativity in the statements that they make, that is a very, very dangerous signal of things to come. So my eye is definitely going to be on Russia and the rights of people and protesters. We've already seen Putin take away some of the rights and limit the rights of protesters since he's taken his third term. So I'm really looking at Russia right now, as is the world, and I think that this verdict is really just going to add fuel to the fire of the opposition.
And I just wonder, finally, musically, and Alexander's no fan of the music, but is there something here about punk that makes this especially interesting?
I think that punk, especially in British history, is the roaring sound of the individual who is rebelling against society at large and asking questions. And so what we have is a protest, is a noise, is a music that is inherently one and the same, I think, with protesting and getting a radical point of view out there. I may not agree with everything that Pussy Riot has to say, nor does the majority of the Russian people. However, it is sparking a discourse that needs to happen, I believe, and not just in Russia, in the world over.